Well, hi everyone, and thank you for the introduction. It's been great 4 years. I mean, I hope you can all see this presentation slides. I'm super excited to show you what the Threatened Species Index team and I have been working on over the last 4 years. And I may even introduce to you the Australian Threatened Mammal Index before its official media release, which is tomorrow. So happy for you to take any pictures for tweets, but maybe if you can hold off with tweeting for one more day, that would be really great. But then please feel free to help us share this tool with the world. All right, let's start. Is it starting? No, it's not. There we go. I like starting presentations with lots of pictures of pretty and cute Australian creatures that I like to share with you. So some of you will recognize there are some Gouldian finches from the Kimberley and some, what is this, the eastern pygmy possum, the Tassie devil, some eastern region parrots, the numbat, leatherback turtle, and in the lower line we have the swift parrots, hooded plovers with chicks from the Mornington Peninsula, the quokka from Rottnest Island in Western Australia, and the corroboree frog. So what do they all have in common? They are all threatened species. So that means that they are vulnerable to endangerment in the near future. Now, we all know this already, that there are lots of threatened species in Australia. In fact, there are currently more than 1,800 species currently listed nationally as threatened. And because, of course, we don't want to see any more species become extinct, recovering threatened species has also been the focus of a national strategy. So the first Australian threatened species strategy was developed in 2015. And in that same year, in 2015, also the threatened species recovery came into life. So that's one of 6 research hubs that has been funded by the National Environmental Science Program. So that's funding by the government and 11 partner organizations, of which UQ is one. And there are lots of projects in this hub, and they're all aiming at the mission to do research that can create the knowledge, get this knowledge together that will help us recover threatened species and prevent further extinction. So that's the whole mission of the Threatened Species Recovery Hub. Now, one thing that is really unusual to the Threatened Species Recovery Hub is that it has really a huge number of real on-the-ground partnerships to do real on-the-ground impact. So the TSR Hub has 126 partner organizations, and that's really partners from academia, from government, from non-government, citizen scientists, and together we're doing research that can save threatened species. Now, as I mentioned before, we have over 1,800 threatened species in Australia, and until recently, while monitoring data was available for many of these individual species, there was really no way to get this data all together, and bring it all in one database to tell us something about the bigger picture, like what's happening with Australia's threatened species on a sort of national scale. And my project has tackled this challenge by starting the journey to develop Australia's first Threatened Species Index. Now, how do you start a journey like that? Well, you look at how others have found solutions to challenges like that. So we basically looked at the stock market indices and how they measure and track economic health. And in the same way, we started developing an index that can report and track changes in Australia's threatened species populations. So this is a bit of a data story. This is not Australia, that's Europe, that's where I'm from. Europe has great headline indicators like the Wild Bird Index and others, but Europe has also lots of people that collect lots of data, and people are really crazy data. They really love data. So all the black dots are representing species data in Europe. And well, that's the case in Australia. So we have less people. We have a very high diversity of species. Threatened species are quite difficult to monitor because they hide. And a big part of the job has been in this project to figure out where all the data sits and bring it all in one place. Now, you can imagine that this might not be a very easy job to do. And let me tell you, it was actually quite tough. But there is a secret to success if you're trying to get people to share their data. And the secret to success is to really establish real partnerships with collaborators from many organizations, as many organizations that you can find that are actually doing management of threatened species and monitoring. So that's exactly where we started. In 2016, we had a big workshop where we invited 42 people from all states and territories from Australia's major NGOs. BirdLife Australia has been a big partner on the project for the bird index that we started off with. And together with all these partners, like 42 people from over 25 organizations, we basically set them in one room and we asked them the question, okay, how do we develop a threatened species index for Australia? And we got their feedback and that got us started. So in the first year, we evaluated a couple of methods that we'll be using for threatened species index. And in the end, we settled on the Living Planet Index approach. So the Living Planet Index approach has been developed by WWF and the Zoological Society of London. It's a quite old index from 1998. Originally, it was developed to report on international targets like those of the and what this index does is it tracks changes in global vertebrate biodiversity through time, and then it reports. Every 2 years, the Living Planet Index team designs, together with WWF, a Living Planet report that highlights these indices, and it shows how global vertebrates are doing. The last Living Planet report was, I think, released in October 2018. And it's this graph that is showing a decline of 60% on average between 1970 and 2014. Now, what the LPI does is, so the Living Planet Index team, what they do is they have an army of volunteers and they ask them to look through the published literature and to extract published data, to extract time series from published data and get it all in the LPI database to develop these indices. I think at the moment they have about more than 4,000 species like mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. However, when we started the work on a threatened species index and together with the LPI team, we had a look at the database, we realized that the records that they had in their database were biased towards Europe, UK, and North America. And also there were not many threatened species time series in there. I think we counted something like 24 mammals and 7 birds for Australia. So definitely not enough to develop a threatened species index. So what was happening there? Apparently data in Australia on threatened species is not really published. So it sits on people's computers, it is on governmental reports, it sits in state repositories, but it hasn't really seen the light of day in form of a scientific publication where it could have been captured by the Living Planet Index. So we knew we had to find an approach to get this data all together and ask people to share this data with us. So a big part of the job was to identify where all the data sits and to get it all in one place. And here we've received really invaluable support from all states and territories of Australia and the Australian government. They gave us advice where the data sits in their jurisdiction and they made sure that we get it. So it was a great collaboration with all jurisdictions and the Commonwealth government. Then the index was developed at UQ, and BirdLife Australia has been a great collaborator, a bird data custodian, but also host for the bird raw data that we were collecting for the bird index. So we started with the bird index and then developed other indices after that. And then we also collaborated with a consortium of tech people from TURN, from the Research Computing Center, and from a web app developer called Planktical to design an automated scientific workflow that automatically can convert raw data collected from custodians into time series data that can be then imputed into the Living Planet Index and trends calculated. And finally, ZSL, the Zoological Society of London, who came over to Australia and they taught us how to use the Living Planet Index to adapt it to the Australian data. Now, if you have a look at the left corner here, how everything works is when we get data from custodians, we ask them to provide this data within a standardized template that we then use to upload data into a confidential raw database. So it sounds simple, but that's actually the biggest part of the job because not many people have provided the data in a standardized way. So they'll give us sometimes reports, and then I'll get support from Diego and Felipe, who are also on this call, to help me with crunching and get it all in shape so that we can actually upload it into the database. So thanks to those guys who have been crunching with me data over the last years. So once the data is in this confidential database, I should say it's confidential because there are lots of sensitivities around threatened species. So sometimes people just don't want to share the exact locations of where they found a threatened species because, well, it can be affected by poaching or it's somewhere on a private property and people just don't want to share this level of information. So that's why we have data sharing agreements that control how much and with whom we can share this full resolution data, call it. So once we have the data in the raw database, all the data processing and temporal and spatial aggregation steps work automatically based on our scientific workflow that we developed. And then finally, we end up with an aggregated database, which is nothing but a CSV file that you can take and put into a model and run trends. And that's the Living Planet Index. So we calculate all the trends, and then we add all those trends into a web app where people can access the data, visualize the data, and also download the data. I'll tell you more about the web app in a couple of slides. Now, first we started bird index because we knew that there would be enough standardized monitoring data out there, and because we had a great support by BirdLife Australia, and humans might say because birds are pretty cool. So I will just quickly show you the results of the last bird index. The bird index has been running now for 2 years, so it's actually quite robust. And that's how the bird index looked like. So you see that it's a trend that always starts at the first year. We call it a reference year. It starts at an index value of 1, and then we show what happens with the rate of change from 1 year to the next. So that's the change in relative abundance of many single species trends that are built together into a geometric mean to calculate a multi-species trend. So this particular multi-species trend is based on, it's showing a 59% decrease between 1985 and 2016. And it's based on 65 species and subspecies for the birds on over 17,000 sites. And that's almost 500,000 individual surveys that we've pulled together in here. And as some regions in Australia have poorer data available than others, we also developed several diagnostic tools that help us understand the robustness and representativeness of the data which underpins the index. And so that's the same trend that I showed you on the previous slide. And then on the right panel, we show a map of Australia where we represent the relative sampling intensity. So how much data did we get from those places? So the pinker it is, the more data we have, and the bluer it is, the less data we have. And you see that there's still big, large areas of white space where we are just not able to gather any data, like arid zone and WA and NT here. And this plot here in the left corner is showing us how much time series we have in the database. So every row here is basically one site that has been continuously monitored with the same method and effort over time for the same species. So you'll see that for the birds, most of the data really starts in 2000. And finally, we have this diagnostic tools that tells us the number of time series or sites in blue and the number of taxa, species and subspecies in black. Right. Okay. But how about I show you some unpublished results on how Australia's threatened mammals are going. So the next couple of slides will be showing you some results that are not out there yet. Happy for you to tweet them again, but if you can tomorrow, please, after we send out our media release. So with the mammals, we've observed a similar story as for the birds. When we were collecting the data, we realized not all data are created equal. So some data sets will come from complete censuses that have been designed for population trends. And then we have some data from highly structured and standardized sampling and more or less standardized sampling. So we'll get some data sets where there are already some spatial biases to completely unstructured, non-standardized data sets that are just not suitable for the calculation of trends because they're not showing, they have been collected in a consistent effort through time and people wouldn't record non-detections or absences. And finally, we have one-off sightings. So if people go to one site but do not return to collect more data, then we can't use this data because we need 2 points to draw a line. So how does a really good data set look like for the index? So for a really good data set, we'll have the custodian provide the monitoring method and also the unit of measurement. Like what are you counting? Are you counting number of individuals or nests or tracks? And then the spatial information has to be provided and it should be matching the species distribution range of the species. The monitoring method has to be standardized and the sites have to be defined as fixed sites. So people should have returned to the same sites over and over again. And then we need at least 2 years to build the smallest time series. The monitoring time should be consistent, so people should, if possible, go to the same season to record this, this data. And then, of course, the monitoring frequency and timing should be appropriate for the species. So if you go to monitor, the species should be there, right? And in a perfect world, the data that we get would be representative of the full extent of the species. Now, how much data did we get for the mammals? So I think we collected about 150 odd data sets on mammal taxa, of which 82 taxon data sets made the cut. So they were suitable for trends. And we've assessed the suitability of the data sets for trends in 2 rounds. So one round by the Threatened Species Index team and a second round where we communicated with every single custodian and we get their opinion on whether the trends for their particular data set look real and whether we should be including it in the National Threatened Species Index. So we've done 2 quality assessment processes. So we ended up with this 82 taxon data sets on 57 mammals from over 1,000 locations and almost 10,000 single surveys. And you can see that the WA government has provided, they're basically the winners of data provision for mammal data. They have provided 18 species datasets, followed by Australian Wildlife Conservancy and Queensland government, actually not too far away from NT government, which is pretty cool. So that's the data that we've incorporated, and I'll show you how the Threatened Mammal Index looks like here. So this is the Threatened Mammal Index of Australia at all sites. It starts at 1995 due to data availability, where the index value is set to 1. And then it's showing a 38% decline on average between 1995 and 2015. So this index is based on 57 taxa or species and subspecies from over 1,000 sites and 10,000 surveys almost, actually. Now, again, we can display these results together with the diagnostic tools. We can show where the data comes from. We can show how much data we have, from which years it would have started. And we can also show the number of time series through time and the number of taxa through time for each year of this index. Something that has been a bit worrying to us is this wide spacing here in New South Wales. And at the moment, we are getting great support by the New South Wales government. That's the Department of Primary Industry and the Environment. So they are helping us right now to get the next mammal index with the data that we've missed out last year, which is really great. Now, mammals are a little bit different to birds in a way that many sites where mammals occur actually receive the targeted conservation management. And before starting the mammal index, we actually had convened a workshop with mammal experts and got their feedback, like how do we develop a threatened index for mammals? And they said, well, look, you should be distinguishing between sites that have received management from those that have not been managed. So the new mammal index basically can be drilled down into 3 sub-indices. So one is showing the sites without any, without any known targeted management, because it's information that we receive from the custodian. So we can calculate an index that is showing the sites with any conservation management, including safe havens, like places that are free from predators, fire management, and also sites without introduced predators like islands and fenced exclosures, like here the cat and fox free areas of the arid recovery reserve that has this floppy fences where cats can't enter. Now, and this is the first index showing the threatened mammals of Australia at sites without any targeted conservation management. What we see is a decrease of 60% between 1995 and 2016. It's an index based on 30 taxa from over 572 time series. That's where they come from. So massive decline. However, there is a good news story. If we look at mammals with any conservation management, including safe havens and predator baiting and fire management and all those things, predator control, we come up with an index based on 29 taxa and 155 time series that actually shows an increase of 46% in comparison to the reference year of 1995. And I'm pretty sure that you guys are going to ask me what this mountain from 1995 and 2003 is. So after our consultations with our stakeholders, especially our consultations with WA, they told us that this is representing what happened during the Western Shields monitoring program in WA, where WA government started to bait against cats. And then the threatened species recovered, but then they had forgotten to bait against foxes, and then the foxes basically crashed the population here. So that's what you see here. And finally, you guys ready to see a good news story? The next slide is showing you that. Our index for mammals from sites without any introduced predators, like islands and fenced areas, is showing a 500% increase between 2000 and 2016. Okay, that's based on 15 taxa and 23 time series, but still it's like a 5-fold increase. And this is really showing us that if you manage and if you invest in conservation management, it actually can pay off. Don't worry, guys, we'll have a session for questions afterwards. What I wanted to show you quickly is, this is a video on the Threatened Species Index. I just wanted to walk you through it, but actually what I would prefer to do would be to show you the actual index, and I hope you still can see that. Can you guys see the web app, the web page?
Yep, can see it, Elisa.
Excellent, thanks, Jeremy. So this is, you can access this webpage as you are, where you are. It's called tsx.org.au. It's the webpage of the Threatened Species Index. And the webpage starts basically with an animation that introduces the index. What is the index? How do we create it? But most importantly, if you hit on the visualization tool here, it gets you to the index. And right now we have two indices. One is on birds and the other one is on mammals. And for the mammals, again, I can select like what group of mammals I want to look at. Do I want to look at different weight categories, or do I want to look only at marine mammals or just terrestrial mammals? So that's the marine. Okay. Sometimes the indices don't work because we need at least 3 taxa at the reference year from which the index is being calculated. So if the index is not possible, you'll have to choose a later reference year. So marine mammals seem not to be doing that bad, actually. But what I wanted to show you is, so if we go back to all, and then this is new for the mammals. The birds didn't have the information on, give me the index that is reporting on sites that have some certain level of management. And then, so I can select, for example, no known management. And that's how the index looks like from 1990. I'm wondering whether it works from 1985. Yeah, it does. And then this last value is basically, so the difference between 1 and this value is showing you how much decline there is. In this case, it's showing a 61% decline from 1985. And the best thing about this web app is that, okay, see this index? So I can hit on data summary, and then you can see what mammals are included in that particular index. So versus which ones but another really cool thing is that for this index, we can download the CSV file. So if you hit download CSV for that index, you get a zip folder that contains a data dictionary and a CSV file. And the CSV file basically contains the time series information. And I'll open it for you. Just, it's of course showing on my different screen, but I can pull it down here. And that's the data. So it's every row in this CSV file is basically one site where one species has been monitored with the same monitoring method and unit of measurement and constant effort. So there is information on the species name, its listing, what's the monitoring method, and so on. And here are the numbers of the time series for that site. And most importantly, in the last field, we have the citation, like who has provided this data set to the index. All right. Now, the big question is, how do I get back to my presentation slide? Let me find out. There we go. No, that's the wrong. Oh, that's the right one. Okay. So just before I finish this presentation, I just wanted to mention The impact of the Threatened Species Index. So earlier in the morning tea, we discussed that the Threatened Species Index has been informing the current EPBC Act review. So this is one of the applications of the index. But also last September, we found out that the Australian government, like the Department of Environment and Energy, well, they now are called the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. Last year, the department decided to include the Threatened Bird Index component in their corporate reporting. So that means that over the next 4 years, they'll be using the Threatened Bird Index to report nationally within their corporate reporting, which is kind of cool, I think. And also a little bit of buy-in. So the bird index has been running for 2 years, and between the first year of running and the second year of running, we have increased the number of taxa from 59 to 65, and the time series from 10,000 locations to over 17,000 locations. And that's only after 1 year of running. So people are already adopting the Threatened Species Index, which is really great. And at the same time, we are also having discussions of integrating the Threatened Species Index into the new Regional Land Partnerships Program, which is basically the new land care program for Australia. And they have a big part on threatened species. And also we were approached by the State of the Environment Reporting Group. So the Threatened Species Index will potentially also feature in the next State of the Environment report for 2021. And just before I finish up, I really like to highlight and stress and say it once again that actually the real champions of conservation are those people that go to the field and monitor and manage those threatened species that we love. So those are people from the states and territories, from Parks Australia, many researchers, many from UQ, scientists, recovery teams, environmental NGOs like BirdLife Australia, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, Arid Recovery, and many more who really have been out there, have been collecting data on threatened species and shared this data for the nation with us. So with this, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for joining in. And there is a Friends of the Index list where we are sending out regular updates. If you want to get this list, just send an email to tsx@uq.edu.au. This is also the email address that you should reach out in case you have standardized monitoring data on threatened species. Remember, the Threatened Species Index is a dynamic tool and it's growing every year. So every year we're incorporating new data. So we are always on the lookout for new Threatened Species Index data. So please reach out to us, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elisa. Anybody have any questions? Oh, look, Jeremy's worked out how to do virtual clapping. Clever.
Oh, yeah.
Questions? We've got plenty of time for questions.